What's going on, guys? It is Carly here, bringing you your weekly dose of horror, and today I'm going to be talking about another movie from the 2000s, 2006 to be exact, and that is The Abandoned. Now this is one of the 8 films to die for, and I'm pretty sure, I'm sure JP actually gave this to me because he accidentally rebought it. I think he was trying to collect all the 8 films to die for, and he made the mistake of picking this one up again when we were at some video store, and he decided to just pass it on to me since there's no sense in having 2 copies. So, yeah, back then I watched it and I remember just being completely bored by it and thinking it dragged on forever. So I was definitely curious to give this one a rewatch and see if maybe I missed out on some stuff and see if I really felt the same way. So the plot here for The Abandoned is you have this woman. She lives in America, but she is originally from Russia. She's Russian, and you learn early on pretty much that something happened when she was a child, and you're kind of flash forward to, I believe it's like 40 years into the future with this woman, and she finds out that she has inherited some property back home. Her parents have passed away, so she decides to go back home and kind of check out this property that she has gotten. Upon arrival, she runs into this guy named Nikolai, and it turns out that he is her twin brother, and at birth they were kind of separated and taken in by different families, and while they're there, they start to experience some weird happenings, and one of the main things is they have these sort of doppelgangers, these like zombie-like people who look exactly like them. The only thing is their eyes are kind of rolled back in their head, and they're really creepy, and they soon find out that pretty much what happens to these people, ghosts, zombies, if you will, whatever, is going to happen to them. So, yeah, the whole movie pretty much takes place on this property, and it's just these 2 characters trying to figure out what's going on and what they're gonna do. So, yeah, upon rewatch, I will say I kind of felt very similar. I find that this movie is just a tad too boring. It runs 98 minutes, and for movies that are entertaining, that's actually not a very long runtime in my opinion. But for a movie like this, I felt it could have afforded to be cut down a little bit, especially, it's not like a huge, I wouldn't say these are like huge budget films or anything like that. So maybe if you shorten it a little bit, it wouldn't have been so bad. But like I said, it takes place primarily just in this house, as well as the sort of wooded areas around it. And it's kind of just this woman trying to get the heck out of there. And it just gets to be a little bit repetitive. And the house itself is very dark. It's one of those literally dark films where a lot of it is just kind of shot in the darkness, and I've said before that kind of gets on my nerves sometimes because you can't always see what's happening. I wouldn't say I have that problem necessarily with this movie. You could see everything that's happening. It's not too dark, but a lot of it does kind of just take place in the dark, and I'm just not a big fan. On a technical level, I think it's a solid film. I think it's shot pretty well, and I think the acting's all right, and the story is okay. It's just kind of basic, and like I said, it's just not overly entertaining enough, and it's more of a just dreary, gloomy movie. Like I said, they have these doppelganger characters, and I think those are pretty creepy, but that's about it when it comes to scary creepiness. I guess the atmosphere, you could say, is pretty eerie, and just what's happening is it's definitely a horror movie, I'm not saying that, but just these people with their eyes rolled back in their head, that looks pretty creepy. But other than that, there's just not a lot to this movie that's really kind of drags you in. I actually was kind of falling asleep for a minute while watching it, but then I quickly woke back up right away and got back into it till the end. So yeah, the characters, they're not bad or anything. I feel like the main girl you're following is just not overly interesting though either. It's not that she's a bad actress, it's just you're not too invested in this character from the get-go, and therefore it just kind of suffers because you're pretty much following her as well as her twin the entire movie, and that's all you really have to go off of. So Yeah, I can say once again, I wasn't a big fan of this. I felt like towards the beginning, I was kind of a little more into the story than the first time I watched it. I kind of put it on more as background noise when I first watched it because I wasn't invested in it from the beginning. But this time I paid more attention, and even still, I just felt like it was a little bit too long, and for the type of movie it just didn't really deserve to be that long. So because it's filmed well though, and it doesn't feel overly low budget or anything like that. I'm not sure what the budget is on these films, but I do know that's just the previews of movies on this disc before this movie came on. Those all kind of look low budget, so I would assume these aren't huge budget or anything like that, and I think for that it was shot pretty well. The acting's decent, and like I said, it doesn't feel cheap or anything like that. It's just the story is kind of bland. So I gave this movie a 5 out of 10. It's just average. There's not much to it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I mean, if you do want to collect, it is cool to collect these, 8 Films to Die For and other sort of series of films that come out. So if you do want to collect it for that reason alone, you could probably pick this up. I think this is the only one of these that I actually own, but yeah, I might seek out the other ones, who knows. But yeah, not that great. 5 out of 10. Thank you guys once again for joining me for this weekly dose of horror, and as always, I'll see you next week.